Well, once again, we dealt with anxiety, the last one, and it was pretty interesting actually. So now we're going to deal with, this test, we're going to deal with eating disorders. Now, it's really interesting. This is really interesting, and it's kind of one of those things where I don't know what triggers different things to happen. But I do want to tell you that in terms of anxiety and eating disorders, the last test and this test, it can be a trigger that happened, but it could also be a chemical imbalance in the body. Now, isn't that the pits? Isn't that the pits? So there could be something there, but a lot of times, even if there's a chemical imbalance in the body, and even though we may have something that triggered these, the best defense for anxiety is getting out and being a part of other experiences and other people. So let's talk about eating disorders. All right, let's talk about eating disorders. And there's several of them, but let's start to address those. Okay. So once again, this is pretty much a synopsis of your book here. Eating disorders are a modern phenomenon that until recently were widespread only in the West. Okay. By the West, we mean West countries, not Western United States. Okay. So eating disorders are a modern phenomenon. Wow. So you mean to tell me that we didn't used to have eating disorders, or we just didn't know about them? No, and the study shows us that we really didn't used to have eating disorders. Wow. We talk about bulimia, nervosa, anorexia. We'll talk about pica, a lot of these things. That didn't used to be a problem. So what has transpired? Well, there's two or three things that have transpired. Number one is the image that we put forth that somebody should look at. That somebody should look like, of what we think is good or bad. Now, the nice thing is that's kind of changing. That's kind of changing. We went through a period of time in the 1950s. Okay, so I don't know. I don't want to generalize this and just say this is the way it is. But I want you to kind of get a feeling of culture. We can't take understanding without understanding culture and what's happening during the time. So years ago, probably your great-great-grandparents, maybe even your great-great-great-grandparents, if a guy was going to go look for a wife, okay, he had a couple of considerations. All right, he had a couple of considerations. First of all, he didn't want this wife to die during childbirth. And childbirth was at home. A lot of times it was even on a trail where you might be, the pioneers might be coming to settle in a different area of land, not just in the United States, but all over. And so we lost a lot of women in childbirth. If the baby didn't come out just right, then the mother's life was really at risk. Okay, the mother's life was really at risk. We have something called a breech baby, and breech baby is where when the fetus comes out of the mom, okay, you can imagine it needs to be head first, because then that pushes the arms down, pushes the legs down, and so then the baby can come out. Well, you can imagine a breech baby where the baby comes out feet first, and the legs begin to split and the arms split, and that mom can't get that kid out without help. And then all of a sudden, we're needing to go in there, and the doctor can go in there and assist that mom and have a really, do a C-section and go in there and pull and do all these different things. I don't know if you've ever been around a cow and a calf. I know growing up, if we had a calf and cow, the mama cow was going to have a breech baby, and all of a sudden you didn't see the head, you saw a hoof. Then what you did was, and it sounds kind of crazy, but this is what you did. You went and you had this kind of cable or chain, and you had what's called a come along, which is a little gear, and you can crank it up, and you hooked it up to your bumper really quick, and you wrapped it around the hoof of that baby calf, and you started cranking that, and you hold this mama calf down, and you do everything you can to get that calf out so that the calf can live and the mom can live. Because because if that calf struggles and can't get that calf out, then the calf dies and the mom dies. And we live in a society now where medically and there are some moms that don't make it, but it's really news, and it's really sad when that happens. It's sad anytime, but it's super sad because we're like, oh gosh, that doesn't happen very often. But back in the pioneer days, they said one out of every three women died during childbirth. Can you imagine that? 1 out of every 3. Well, so you don't want to lose your wife, you don't want to lose your child. So what makes a woman a better, more prepared to deliver children? Bigger hips, and a very strong, robust woman with really large hips did a better job delivering children. Now what's happened is now genetically children are a little bit different now. And now we have really skinny moms that deliver these babies, and we have ultrasounds to tell us if the baby's in the right spot, the wrong spot. You just don't think about that anymore. I mean, some of the most petite women, deliver these babies, and years ago that just wouldn't have happened. So I don't want you to fear. If you're a lady out there and you haven't had kids yet, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I better put on about. I better put on 100 pounds before I have this kid. No, that's not what they're saying at all. Genetically, and now that's not a problem. Okay, now that's not a problem. But the other thing that made a really ideal woman was, when we did everything by hand, a woman that could help you out in the field. I mean, boy, she's quite a gal. She can plow 30 acres a day. Well, we don't think like that now. We don't be like, okay, well, I'm gonna marry a girl that can really plow, really help with the cows. Really, that gal's pretty good. She can milk the whole herd before morning, and that type thing. So it used to be a really big, strong woman was a catch. Okay, well, I don't know when that changed, and I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I really think there's a lot of beauty inside that we got to look for. But all of a sudden it became, and it was kind of a movie star thing. As a matter of fact, smoking was really prevalent in the early 1960s, and we talk about it in psychology, and a lot of it was they had extra nicotine in the actresses and the cigarettes that they had and that they promoted. They had one that had extra nicotine, and a lot of people died. A lot of people died of lung cancer and different things, but they had extra nicotine, so the person was just fidgety all the time. So it's like a cup of coffee, and then except they would put that on steroids. It would be this nicotine, and these cigarettes were super loaded. So these actresses, I mean, they literally were fidgety, and because they were that fidgety, they just lost weight all the time. Their metabolism was going all the time. Extremely unhealthy, really bad bad mentally, bad physically, and the whole deal. But we got to where somehow, some way, women thought they should be ridiculously thin. Okay, and so that's why we begin to have this. That's why we begin to have this. This is a modern phenomenon of eating disorders. Is the perception of what women should look like. Then we had another issue come up, and that's that genetically we've altered food. Okay, food that used to be high carbs, now you can get all this food. Now the problem is, some of it has no taste. Well, forget taste. Some of it has no vitamins. Okay, so once again, what's the goal? Is the goal to be healthy, or is the goal to look a certain way? Now, I will say this for the people watching this tape, I would say for the most part, your generation's already past this. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have this, and you might, we all have this, we might be like, oh, I'm a little heavy, I look a little fat today, oh my gosh, but you don't have that, and if you do worry about it, you need to really think about it because, and maybe you need to lose some weight to just be healthy. But other people's perception is no longer that this person has to be this movie star that has this, and now it's interesting because even in Europe passed a law. It's kind of interesting. It talks about it in your book, but Europe passed a law that a model has to weigh over a certain amount based on their height. They no longer accept this super skinny, almost malnutrition person, because they had models that had these eating disorders, and they began to realize that people were beginning to follow them and thinking that's the model to choose. That will make me popular and stuff. So that's where we got going with these eating disorders. So let's talk about some of them here, okay? All right. So the first one that we have is bulimia nervosa, okay? Bulimia nervosa. Now, what happens in bulimia nervosa is the person eats the food, okay? The person eats the food, and then after a period of time before the food is digested, the person actually goes in and gags themselves and makes themselves throw up. Okay, once again, this is bulimia nervosa. So the person eats the food, gets the satisfaction of eating the food, but is afraid that when that food's digested, it will go to the rest of their body, so they make themselves throw up. So several problems here. First of all, we don't get the nutrients, we don't get the stuff we need in our body, but that's not even the biggest problem with bulimia nervosa. The biggest problem is we have stomach acid, that when we make ourselves throw up, that stomach acid begins to eat and deteriorate the esophagus. And that stuff's super strong. What stomach acid eat up? I mean, you know, the bile eats up the meat, and the stomach acid eats up the carbs and different things. But this combination of bile and stomach acid coming up begins to eat up the esophagus. Okay, so what do we do? Okay, so what do we do with somebody? What do we do with somebody with bulimia nervosa? We work with the trigger. It says medical treatment is antidepressants, okay, and then psychosocial treatments. We get that person, it's easier said than done. Somebody with an eating disorder, the trigger is being fat. And you're going to have case studies a little bit later, and you're going to talk about, there's this one lady that says that if she can't see, when she looks in the mirror, if she can't see every vertebrae in her back, and she can't see we see our clavicle a little bit, but she's like, if I can't see all the bones, if I can't see the scapula, my shoulder blade, if I can't see every vertebrae, then I'm overweight. There's a lady in there, and she's about, if I remember right, she's like 5'10", 5'11", and she weighs 68 pounds. And she just kind of looks like death, and the skin's just hanging off her face. She has absolutely no meat to her body, and she still sees herself as fat. So this can become a really serious disorder here. Once again, eating disorders. And what's the trigger? The trigger is we feel that we are fat or unhealthy because of what we've eaten. So the first one was bulimia nervosa, where we actually eat, and then we cause ourselves to gag, and we try to regurgitate the food before it can go into our body. So that's the first one. We'll come back and talk about anorexia nervosa next.